Well, we talked about the quarterbacks now, and we had to pump the brakes on how we judge them and not get too high or too low after week one. Let's look at some teams and where we need to maybe pump the brakes a little bit. And I'm going to start myself with the Dallas Cowboys. Played great, awesome performance, looked very sharp on the road. We all thought the Cleveland Browns tremendous defense, but let me just back up a little bit and say, all right, let's hold on. Let's not put them in the Super Bowl just yet. Maybe Cleveland's not quite as good as we thought. They didn't get great quarterback play. So I want to see the Cowboys next week. Also want to see the Minnesota Vikings. They had an impressive performance against the Giants. Looked great on offense. Sam Darnold, smooth. Kevin O'Connell had a great game plan for him. Brian Flores had that defense rolling, but they'll have a much bigger test this week against the San Francisco 49ers. Any thoughts on those two teams?
Yeah, Coach, I'm sure you did some version of this for all the years you were coaching, all the great teams you had. I used to always tell our guys that the future of the NFL is written every Monday. So we won yesterday 30-10. Now we're going to the Super Bowl. We lost 30-10. We're the worst team that was ever assembled. And so this is going to happen 17 times over the course of the year. Every Monday, we're going to come in here and we're going to have to deal with this, good or bad. And I always felt like the team that was able to just eliminate all that stuff and just go to work, they're the ones that had the best chance. So we're going to ride this roller coaster every week. And, certainly Dallas goes up to Cleveland. It was impressive. They were dominant on offense. They were dominant on defense. They scored in the kicking game. They really got after them. But it's a long way to go. I think Dallas will benefit from the Giants and the Commanders not being real good right now. I think Philadelphia is the obvious competitor in that division, but there's a lot of games to be played. They're off to a good start. I'm glad they got the Dak Prescott contract worked out. I
Yes.
just think he's an amazing player and an amazing leader. I think that probably gave their team a shot in the arm as well. On the flip side of that, with Cleveland was disappointing to me. Clearly, they're trying to find their way on offense. Deshaun Watson has proven that he's not quite the player that he was in Houston. They have to figure out how to create an environment where he can have success. He's a big part of what they're going to do this year. But the other thing for me is their defense. If you think
Yeah.
about them going down to Houston last year in the playoff game, and then this outing against the Cowboys, the last two outings for this defense have not been very good. Now, again, I'm not overreacting on that side either. I do think they'll find a way to get some rhythm on offense. I do think that defense will stiffen up and some of those playmakers will start to show up a little more. But it's certainly a disappointing start for them. But again, let's pump the brakes on throwing everybody out of Cleveland too.
Yeah. Speaking of pump the brakes on throwing teams under the bus, I'm going to go with the Carolina Panthers. I know everybody is saying this is the worst team in football. They haven't made any improvement over last year. They were terrible. They were awful. And it was a bad game. It was a tough, tough game. Maybe I'm a friend of David Canales and I'm a little bit biased, but it reminds me, I think back to my first game as a head coach. I'm in Tampa Bay. We're playing the Green Bay Packers. And everybody, oh, it's a new year, new day, new coach. We go down 34-3. Couldn't play worse. Brett Favre carves us up. And I'm walking off the field and oh, we're worse. Why did we get you as a coach? We're worse than we were last year. You stink. Go home. And it was an awful feeling. But I told our team we have to grow from that. Well, about 9 weeks later, we go up to Green Bay and we play them nip and tuck all the way through. We lose the game 13-6, but we're a completely different team. We end up winning 5 of our last 7. We knocked the Washington Redskins out of the playoffs, and we grew from that. And I think Carolina has a chance to do the same thing.
Yeah, there's no doubt, and that was a gut punch for them to go down to New Orleans and just really get demolished in every way. And like you said, you gotta kind of put your feet in the ground and stand in there and fight, and you got to learn from the experience. And there will be growing pains in Carolina, and they're going to have to withstand the outside noise as well because people are going to say it's a bad hire. They have a bad team. The quarterback can't
Yeah.
play. all of those stories. And, I think if you're in those roles, you have to draw inspiration from people who have been in those situations before. And, for Dave Canales, hey, looking back at your story, for Bryce
Yeah.
Young, hey, look at how
Yeah.
hard it's been for some of these other quarterbacks who ended up being in the Hall of Fame and how they struggled early on. And they just have to kind of block everything out. And their biggest thing is stay together and improve. Stay together and
Yes.
improve. And the improvement's going to come from honest evaluation of what happened. You can't sugarcoat it. You have to be honest. This was good. This wasn't very good. How do we get this better? And then go to work on the practice field. And I think if they can do that, they're certainly way off of everybody's radar. You look at
Yeah.
every power
Yeah.
ranking in the NFL, they're 32, right? But
Yeah.
but sometimes that gives you a little edge. And I came to Dallas in 1992, and one of the things that was interesting, 92 was the year we won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
What was interesting to me was the core players who were there in 1989, Jimmy Johnson's first year. They took great pride in the fact that they were 1-15 and that they had kind of turned the whole
Yeah.
thing around, that they had gone through that and they had taken the lumps and they had taken the criticism and they got stronger individually and collectively as a result of it. And then when they stand on the sidelines in the Rose Bowl holding the trophy over their head, winning 52-17 against the Buffalo Bills, there's an amazing sense of accomplishment having gone through that journey. Now, Carolina's way far away from that, but those situations can be galvanizing for people. And then when you do have success, it's that much more meaningful.
No question about it, Jason. And the lesson in that is that one year doesn't define you. So certainly one game shouldn't define you. And you just
Absolutely.
have to put your mind to it and grow and persevere, and you'll be okay. Well, with that
And
in
in
mind,
wor-
you have anybody else?
and
Go ahead.
coach, in a world where the outside world's trying to define you by one year
Yes,
or trying to define you
absolutely.
by one game. And so again, putting those walls up individually and collectively, I think is a big part of the developmental process.
So after one game, is there anybody else, any other teams you want to pump the brakes on a little bit?
Well, well, one of the stories that gets so much attention is the Jets and Aaron Rodgers and all of that. And so they travel from New York to San Francisco. They go play one of the best teams in the league, and it was not necessarily an awe-inspiring evening for them. But one of the disappointments was their defense that's been so good got riddled a little bit. San Francisco ran the ball down their throats. San Francisco possessed the ball a ton, but I believe at the end of it, the Jets are going to play good defense like they have. They have too many good players over there, a scheme they believe in, and they've played at a very high level with. And then to have number 8, Aaron Rodgers, back in there, even though he didn't seem like the exact Aaron Rodgers that we saw in Green Bay 5 years ago, it's certainly a comforting feeling for everybody who's a Jets fan to know that he's back and he's capable. Didn't move quite as well in the pocket. I still think he's the smart quarterback with the elite arm. We saw flashes of that throughout the game. I just think they too, if they can kind of handle the noise around them in New York and just settle in and improve each week, I think they have a chance to compete for that division come year's end.
I felt the same way. There was a positive to me that Rodgers made it through the game. He made some great throws. They're going to grow with that. And then defensively, I almost think they got lulled to sleep. Christian McCaffrey's not playing. They're probably going to throw the ball. And I think they just didn't have that juice that they needed, but they'll bounce back from it.
No doubt. And their defense typically travels. So trust me,
Yes.
they're going to watch that tape and they'll be objective with themselves and say, hey, this wasn't us. And they'll play better this week.
Yeah. And then you've got one other team you want to talk about, right?
Yeah, the other one for me is the Bengals. I thought one of the great wins of the weekend was New England going in there. We were laughing about it. Devin McCourty was teammates with Gerard Mayo for years, and all Mayo was talking about was how his new Nike shoes got some Gatorade on them, and he was wondering if they were going to be okay after the game. And all I could think about when we're talking about shoes was talk about big shoes to fill, right? The tenure that Coach Belichick had in New England is like none other. And now here's Mayo going in there, and everyone thinks they're the 31st worst team in the league, and they should tank the year and they should play for draft picks and all that. And all he did was take his team to Cincinnati, Ironically enough, they were on to Cincinnati and they got after the Bengals. And I wouldn't overreact if we're on the Bengals side. They've struggled early on the last few years. I think they're 1-5 in their last 6 openers. It just seems like it takes them a little bit of time to get their rhythm. But to me, for them, it was a disappointing start to have New England come in there at their place and just beat them and really control the game. They didn't have great rhythm on offense. They just didn't play with great juice as a team. So disappointing for them. But again, I think they're going to be a team that rights the ship and they'll start competing the right way and they'll be in contention at the end of the year for that division as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Not having Jamar Chase early in the week and that distraction that bothered them a little bit. T. Higgins, your number 2 receiver, goes out, and just Friday you realize you're not going to have him. So there'll be a different offense this week against Kansas City for sure. But I was happy for Gerard Mayo. Really good young man, great dedication. He wants to be great. He wants his team to be great. And I visited there this offseason. I know you've made some trips to different places. I sensed the passion that these guys had and the belief they had in Gerard, and it played out Sunday.
I think in a good way for them in New England, you know, without having asked him this, but I would bet Gerard Mayo would say the most influential football person in his life has been Bill Belichick,
No
right? He
question.
played for him, he coached for him. Each and every day, Bill Belichick taught him what it's like to be a championship football player and coach. And so the dynamic is all that incredible wisdom from Coach Belichick, and then Gerard's own stamp on it, right? A younger guy who played in the NFL. So now we can take all this wisdom and then kind of synthesize it and then share it to the players and create an environment that's specific to him, that has his own stamp on it. So I think in a lot of ways it can be the best of both worlds. He's a young coach. He's going to learn. There are going to be a lot of things that come up here over the next few weeks that, are new experiences for him and that he's going to handle well and maybe not so well. And, but he seems to me to be the kind of guy who learns as he goes, learns from his experiences and grows from them. So I think it's a good dynamic there in New England and a heck of a start for those guys.
Learning and growing. That was the theme for week 1, and we saw some good games. We're going to have a great game in Houston, and I can't wait for that one. But are there any other games in week 2 that kind of have you excited?
It's a good question, Coach. The game Thursday night is the one that kind of jumps out to me. Buffalo going down to Miami. I think Miami's a really interesting team. And I think about them a little bit. You remember watching the NBA in the 80s? I loved the Lakers. And the Lakers were Showtime, right? They scored 120
Yep.
points and they were up and down the court and there was nobody like them and they'd win the West. Their record would be 62-20 and they had the best record in the NBA and led the league in scoring and all that. Then they go play the Celtics in the playoffs and the Celtics would slow the whole thing down,
Yeah.
force them to play half court. They'd force these guys to make shots in critical moments. The scores would always be under 100 points. And it was a different game. And it took a lot of years for the Lakers to figure out that they had to be tougher and they had to figure out how to beat the Celtics, particularly at their place in a different style of game. And when they broke through, they broke through. And then they started winning all their championships. And to me, I feel a little bit that same dynamic with Miami. They're so good on offense. They're the greatest show on grass, and they scored 70 points in a game and all of that. But then they have to go play some tough games in their division in Buffalo at the end of the year when it's snowing, and go on the road to Kansas City in the playoffs. And they're a different team. They're not a tough enough team yet, and that's how they have to break through. Everyone knows how dynamic they can be on offense. But can they be a team that wins different ways in tough environments against good teams? And, they played at home the other day against Jacksonville. I get all that. But what I was pleased for them was it was a different kind of win. It was a little bit of an ugly win. The defense had to make the big play, the punch out, Javon Holland as the runners going into the end zone. And then the offense had to respond. And then they had to win in a field goal late. And they didn't score 70 points. They scored 20 points. And, So for me, I keep looking at them as a team that, boy, they're capable, but are they tough enough to break through? And I love what what Mike McDaniel said after the game. He just said, "Hey, we wouldn't have won this game the last couple of years," and that's
Mm.
a big step for that team. So it'll be curious. The game's going to be down there. It's not on the road, but it's going to be curious against a division opponent early on in the season if they can kind of continue to show that kind of mental toughness. Certainly against a guy like Josh Allen, who was one of the elite players in the league again last week, up there for the Bills.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to that one too. We were there the last game of the season last year. If Miami wins, they're going to win the division. They're going to have home playoff games. If they lose, they're going to have to go to Kansas City. And Buffalo went down there and took that game from them. So this is a big game. And I know these Dolphin players have been waiting for this rematch all summer. So it's going to be great.
And coach,
I'm
I'm
looking
sure
at.
you've had a ton. I'm sure you've had a ton of teams that kind of were hitting that ceiling, right? And like, how are
Yep.
we going to kind of break through? And for whatever reason, we're falling short, and then somehow you kind of break through that ceiling and take it to the next level. And I think that's where their team is. And it'll be curious to see if they can respond.
Yep, for us, you're exactly right. I was in Indianapolis. We kept losing to the Patriots. Finally, we had to go up there on a Monday night and beat them. And once we beat them in New England, our confidence level, everything just skyrocketed. And you're right. That's what Miami needs, I think. Need a
Yeah, it's
big
amazing,
win.
isn't it?
Well, the game I'm looking at is two other undefeated teams, 1-0 teams, the San Francisco 49ers and the Minnesota Vikings. Both teams coming off impressive wins. Um, for the Niners, Christian McCaffrey may not play again this week. Jordan Mason had 147 yards, big game. Brandon Ayuk wasn't quite himself. He'll be in practice all week and probably get more of him. Their defense was exceptional against Aaron Rodgers. They're going to take that defense on the road against Sam Darnold and the Vikings, who looked great against the Giants. Darnold only threw 5 incomplete passes. Aaron Jones gave the running game a big lift, and Brian Flores had that defense playing lights out. So I am looking forward to that one. See if the Vikings are a little bit better than we thought. See if San Francisco can take it on the road.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun game, and that environment up there, as you know, it's loud in Minnesota, and those fans get into it when they're blowing that horn and doing all that stuff. I mean, it can be a tough place to play, and I think it's going to be important for the 49ers to have that same formula they had last week against the Jets. If they can run the ball as much as they did and as effectively as they did, it's going to quiet the whole thing down. And if they get into a game where Minnesota is able to stop the run on early downs, and Brock Purdy, for as well as he's played, he doesn't want to go up to the line of scrimmage on third down, dealing with crowd noise, dealing with all those looks that Brian Flores is going to present to them. That's not the kind of game they want to play up there. And so if they can play their game, run it, take some pressure off the quarterback, keep Sam Darnold and those guys off the field, I think they have a real good shot. I think the 49ers are a better team. The question is, can they play better than Minnesota at the Vikings' place?
Well, it's going to be a fun week too, for sure. And we are going to have a great one in Houston, the Texans and the Bears.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.